Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to all of the new subscribers. I recently reached 100 and I am so grateful for everyone's support. So today I am doing homemade Salisbury steak with gravy. So in this video you'll see how I made mine. Of course you'll need your hamburger meat. This is 2 pounds of hamburger meat and I'm adding in 2 eggs. You can use more or less depending on how many people you're trying to feed. And just adjust your recipe as needed. This is about a cup of breadcrumbs I'm adding in. And these are actually Italian seasoned breadcrumbs. However, you don't have to have any type of seasoning in them. That's just what I had on hand. You can add more or less. It depends on what you like. Now I am adding in a recipe I actually got from another YouTuber. Her YouTube name is Kiwanna's Kitchen, and she had a dry onion soup recipe seasoning that she had made, and so I made it and I am using it to season my Salisbury steak. I'll add it into the description box so you guys can see how it's made, and I'll also add her name. And then I'm going to add in a tablespoon of minced garlic. And then I'm adding in some Worcestershire sauce. So this is completely optional. I just like the flavor of it. I'm adding in 3 tablespoons. You don't have to add this. You can you can leave it out, but I just think it gives it more flavor. So I added it in mine. Once you're done adding in everything, you're gonna have to get your hands dirty. So you'll either use gloves or you'll just make sure your hands are clean and you'll get in there and give it some love. So as you can see, I'm just making sure that everything combines together thoroughly. You want to make sure that egg combines into the meat so there's not just chunks of yolk. And the reason I added in that egg and breadcrumbs is so that, of course, the patty won't fall apart as it is cooking. So as you can see now, I am just forming my patties. You can form them to your desire. I just made mine medium size, not too thick, so that's what I'm doing now. And I believe this made about 8, if I'm not mistaken, 8 patties, and I just cooked them in my pan in batches. So what I'm doing here is I am cooking my first batch of 4, and I'm just going to fry it like I would a hamburger. I'm going to fry both sides. You don't have to worry too much about the middle being done because we're going to bake it. You're going to want to slice your onions like so. You can chop them into squares, but I like mine thinly sliced. Once that one side cooks, you're going to want to flip them over, of course. You don't want them to cook too hard to where they burn. So I would just keep an eye on them. Just cook like you would a hamburger and just don't worry about the middle. And my suggestion is not to try to flatten them down with your spatula, because then that kind of gets the juices to flow out and then you kind of have a dry patty. So you definitely don't want that. So now I am taking the first batch out and I'm going to add in the second 4 patties, and then once those are done, we will move on to our gravy. So you'll want to just leave all of that grease that you see in there from that hamburger meat, leave it in your pan, because you're going to use all of that to make your gravy for your Salisbury steak. We're just going to bake it all together. It's going to be really good. So these, I think on both sides, it was about maybe like 4 minutes on both sides, if even that. And I had it on medium-high heat. So you'll just want to kind of keep an eye on it. It's all about what kind of stove you have. So once your patties are done, into your pan, you're going to add in 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. As you can see, it's kind of getting lumpy. That's okay. You're going to add in about 3 cups of milk. Gradually add it in while you're whisking. That way you can get rid of them lumps. You can use milk, you can use broth, you can use water and just add seasoning. It's really all up to you. I think milk gives it a more thicker and richer taste. I also did add a little, like about a half cup of broth in it. And then it was still a little bit thick, so I did add in a 1/4 cup of water, and you'll see that here in a little while as well. You can make your gravy however you want. You could also put add maybe, well, actually you don't even have to add butter because you'll have your oil from your, or the grease from your hamburgers. You can add your onions in there and let them cook, and then add in your flour like so to make your gravy. Or you can use gravy packets if you don't want to make homemade gravy. It's all up to what you like. I prefer to make my own gravy. That way I can control the seasonings in it and the salt. So a lot of the packets seem to have more salt, and I like to make sure I don't have too much salt in there because I don't really like salty gravy. You will be adding in seasonings to your gravy once you're done adding in your liquid. So that will be coming up. So you're just going to want to continue to whisk your gravy like this. And this just ensures that all of the lumps are out and gives it a little bit of time to kind of cook through that flour. Make sure everything is blended together and not too lumpy, or because you definitely don't want to have a lump of flour in your gravy while you're eating. That wouldn't be very good. So as you can see now, my gravy was a little bit too thick, so I am adding in that 1/4 cup of just plain water. You don't have to use water. You could use more milk or more broth or whatever you have on hand. I just decided to use water because I am going to be seasoning this gravy as well. And what I'll season this with, and you'll see, is I'm going to add in some sea salt, some pepper, and some more of the dry onion soup mix that you saw me add into the hamburger meat. So I'm going to be adding that in here into the gravy. And after you add it in, you'll just continue to whisk until you feel like it's done. It'll be like a thicker gravy consistency, but you don't want it to be too thick because you're going to be baking it as well, and you don't want it to thicken up into the too thick into the oven. But then again, you also want to make sure that it's thick enough to where when the hamburgers release their juices, it won't make your gravy watery. So you really want to be sure to make it the perfect texture, perfect consistency of thickness. So I'm adding in the dry soup mix now, and then I'll whisk it a little bit more and let this cook on low heat. That way I can move on to getting the stuff ready to put into the oven. So I'm going to get a baking dish, and about 2 inches deep or so, 2 to 3 inches deep. Doesn't have to be too deep, but deep enough to where you can pour your gravy on top of your meat. And I'm also going to have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. You also want to make sure that you don't burn your gravy. So definitely make sure that you either turn it off or turn it down before you take your eyes off of it. In your pan, it's okay if they overlap each other. They don't all have to be flat. As you can see, mine will overlap, and that's completely okay because they'll be covered in that gravy and they'll still all cook evenly. So you don't have to worry about having a huge pan and making sure they're all flat. Once you get your hamburger patties into your pan, you're going to pour on your gravy. And you just pour it on, make sure it kind of gets all over. But you can also, you know, get a spoon and spoon on the gravy on top of the ones that you didn't get. This gravy turned out really good. Next time I probably will add my onions to my gravy instead of putting them on top the way that I did in this video, just because I feel like it would be they would be more softer. The onions were still soft. I just think they would be, I like my onions really like melt in your mouth soft. I'm not sure how everybody else likes theirs, but that's how I like mine. I don't like too crunchy. And when they weren't really crunchy, but they were still, they just weren't as soft as I normally like mine. So that's something I'll probably do differently next time I make it like this. Normally I do it all in the pan, but my pan wasn't big enough for 8 patties, so that's why I decided to bake it, which it still turned out really good, especially with that soup mix seasoning that I got from the Kiwanna's Kitchen YouTuber. So once you get your onions on top of your meat, you're going to get you a piece of aluminum foil, and you're going to cover up your pan and add it into your oven. And I baked it for about 25 to 30 minutes. It depends on how fast your oven cooks. Everyone's oven's differently, of course. So I didn't let mine stay in no longer than 30 minutes, and it was perfectly done. Once it's done, you'll pull it out, let it cool off, and serve. You can serve it with rice or mashed potatoes. It's completely up to you. I hope you guys enjoy this. Leave me a comment if you have a different way you make yours. And as always, subscribe if you haven't already. Like and share. I love to connect, so you can also add me on Facebook. My Facebook